Hey, it's Carrie Baxter, and this is a deep dive into my debut album, Seven. Seven is the exploration of repentance, redemption, self discovery, survival, and of course, healing. I hope you love it. I think the moment I knew it needed to be an album was definitely Loved You Before, because previous to that, I had done two EPs, and then I entered into this section of time where I just started writing. I wanted to explore some new sonic worlds, and I had a bunch of topics that I wanted to write about. And we started that, and it became 5 tracks, and I was like, woo! I finished an EP. And then it wasn't until, I think actually every artist or creative will understand when it starts to drip out of you, you just have to keep going. So I think Loved You Before was maybe track 6 that had come in that batch of work. So that was the moment where I thought, oh, I've just got to keep going. I can't actually stop now, because it just felt like, this is not a great metaphor, but it felt like I was getting sick. I just felt like I needed to keep on going. So definitely that track. That period of time was actually February 2022, and now the album comes out late February, early March 2026. So is that correct? Maybe not. 2023? Yeah, 2023 to 2026, the exact same time as I started writing it, is when it's finished and coming out. So I feel like I was in a very turbulent time when I started this writing process, which is quite a long time ago, and for me, I think is probably the biggest transition I've ever been walked through in my life. It was one of those periods where everything just seemingly was falling apart, boom, boom, stuff was just blowing up, exiting my life in quite quick succession, and I found it very hard to handle, because I really thrive when I've got stability, and when that stuff gets taken away from me, the pillars of what you would consider to be your stability, when that goes for me, I found it really difficult. And I think at the start of this writing process, I didn't really understand what I was doing, but with hindsight, I think what I was actually doing was turning towards the art as a mirror. So when I started writing, I was like, oh wow, I started to understand that I was being really honest with myself for the first time in my entire life. And from that point onwards, I knew that it was necessary to keep doing that. It no longer became, oh, I'm writing music, or I'm writing a certain style or anything like that. It just became something that was very, very necessary for me to do. 7 is known to be the number of completion. So I guess because I had a 5-track EP that was called something completely different, by the time I had got to the end of the album, 7 really made sort of moderate sense to me at the start. And then because 7 is also associated with divine connection, spirituality, introspection, transcendence, all of those themes came up for me in the process of the 3 years of writing the album. So when I did get to the point where I thought, oh, this is done, 7 was a no-brainer. The song that surprised me the most when I wrote it was probably Magic Wand, just because the circumstance and what I went through in that song, I never really imagined or visualized that I could write something so light and healing from what I was writing about, because the situation was quite the opposite. So for me to turn that into something that now feels quite uplifting when I listen to it was very important to me, and I knew that when I listened back to that I had started healing, because I was like, oh wow, that's cool that I can turn something quite dark into something quite light. The track that was hardest to finish was definitely Change. I remember quite vividly 2 days in the studio with Chris and Stefan. We wrote this in Dublin, and on the first day, like all the melodies were coming, but I just did not know what the song was about. And it's really important for me to articulate quite clearly in my lyrics what I have to say. And the verses started talking about patterns that I was witnessing in myself that I didn't like. So it was very shadow territory for me. And when I spotted that, I was like, oh, I don't want this song to be like so dark. And on the second day, it took me so many hours to finish 2 lines in the chorus, because the chorus actually talks to my younger self, forgiving her for anything that I guess I was mad at myself for, patterns that I hadn't changed yet or looked at. And it was kind of like a letter to my younger self saying, you're going to be so fine. It's okay. And I think like trying to pull that out of myself, that was a tough day for me. I had to spend quite a few hours by myself on the floor in the mic room, in the booth, just because I just really had to kind of shut out a lot of noise to, I guess, hear what I was telling myself, to then put it on the page. The hardest line for me to speak from the album, it's a tough one, but I think it's gonna have to go to the last line of the whole album, which is in St. John Be Good to Me, which is fell into the fire, burned by the flames, lost in the forest, but I'm still the same. Head underwater, I want to be saved. Take all of my guilt, take all of my shame. That was ironically pretty easy for me to say, but I think I didn't scare myself when I wrote that, but I was very taken back when I wrote that song. I was in a very challenging place, and actually just to write that paragraph and listen to it back, I was like, wow. Woo! Okay. And that's when I really started to listen to myself from that point onwards. Tough song. The track that changed most from demo to final version is definitely Open Up Your Arms. That was started with my very good friend Rob at the end of a session where he just started playing these chords, and immediately I had a melody idea, but we had finished the session, so I just quickly put it down on voice note. Came in the next day and we like fleshed it out just to piano vocal, and for ages I thought, oh, I'm just gonna leave it like that. Maybe I'll just have one gorgeous slow, sparse ballad on the album. And because it was made quite late on in the process, I had brought then the song to James Berkeley, who produced 6 of the tracks on the album. And I was like, do you know what, James? He knows that I was like so obsessed with all things orchestral at the time, and I was like, yeah, just put some strings on there. And like when songs like split in half, James, and then it just turns into something else, and like within an hour, I don't know, we just had like a really good bond from like the amount of tracks we had done together. He just got what I was trying to do, and so then it just kind of transformed into what it is now, and I was so happy about that. The vocals were incredibly hard to record for that, however, we got there. Collaborating with people across this project allowed me to understand that I can't do this alone, and how to let people be part of your process in a way that is authentic and not performative. It was a very intimate process for me, this album. Very few people, and the same people working across literally everything. And it was vulnerable enough for me to share with what I would consider my inner creative circle, let alone for this music to go out into the world. So I actually think that having the cocoon, that safety net of like people being there to listen and understand deeply what I'm trying to say, gave me or fueled my confidence to put this album out, actually. Because a lot of people always ask me about communication, vulnerability, writing, but that is a credit to the people that are around me in the process, because how much they've supported me and actually taken the space and the time to understand what I'm trying to either visually achieve, sonically achieve, whatever it is, that then actually builds your trust up with yourself, the other people involved, and then thus it's a much easier process to give something that is very vulnerable out to a much wider audience. When I listen back to 7, it feels very distinctively in 2 parts. Very uncomfortable growth and healing. So what I want people to feel or hear or understand is that growth is not linear, and that is okay. Healing is, or can be, very messy, and that is also okay. And I think knowing, number one, that you're not alone, okay? Let's just say that. But number 2, knowing that you can heal, grow, and develop into the person you want to be one day at a time without having the answer yet. Don't need the answer to start. Writing 7 was probably the biggest, or has been the biggest learning curve of my life to date. I think I learned that being honest and vulnerable is very uncomfortable for me, but in the end is so freeing. I thought I was honest and vulnerable before, but the degree that I have gone to with 7 has had a massive ripple effect on my life, and in turn has made me a much better version of who I am. So I think at the end of the album, it's wonderful to have a debut album, and I love it dearly, but the album is not the greatest joy that I've been given from this process. It's been over the course of 2.5, 3 years nearly, and the biggest joy for me is the person that I had to become to finish the album.